for that. For the panel discussion, we have Mr. Milind Chaudhary, who is the CFO with Bajaj Allianz. He is a chartered accountant and CWA and is currently working as CFO with Bajaj Allianz General Insurance, handling legal, admin, compliance, and fraud management. He has earlier worked in Oriental Insurance Company, Selectica India, and Kalyani Steels. He has extensive experience in insurance sector. Sir, please. Our next panelist is Ashish Sharma. He is a partner in Deloitte and leads the IT asset management practice for Deloitte in India. He has advised clients on cybersecurity and governance, managed security services, program management, GRC strategies. He has also acted as speaker at various forums on cybersecurity and GRC. Ashish, please welcome. Our next panelist is Mr. R. Vittal Raj. He is a CA, CISA, CISSP, CISM, CJIT, and CFE, and has more than 27 years of experience as partner with Kumar and Raj Company. He has directed and managed projects in the areas of information security and web application vulnerability assessments. Vittal was part of the ISACA International Committee, Board of Directors, and he was Vice President from June 2013 to 2015. He is currently a part of Finance Committee at the ISACA headquarters. I welcome Vittal on the stage. I request our board members, Rajesh Chaudhary and our past president Nilesh Bhave, to felicitate the guests.
Good afternoon to you all. I think we had some excellent sessions. Yeah,
so that we have the more benefit of listening. Anyway, you're going to wear double hat and triple hat. So I think this is the last panel discussion for the day, and the title given is a little odd. Somebody may say it's wearing the glasses of security around the world, or going around the world wearing security glasses. The whole thinking was that the security, as many speakers have mentioned, is a buzzword, and it's become a business and a commodity, and it's a real issue. How do the different parts of the world look at security? Are there any standards? Are there any approaches? Are there any tools, technologies? What's happening in financial services sector? What's happening in other sectors? Just to get a sort of a bird's eye view, and be aware that there may be standards, there may be approaches which may be beneficial. So the whole purpose of this discussion is that, and with that sort of a background, let me start with you, sir. How do you see this whole paradigm of data privacy security in the field you come from? You come from a financial services industry, Bajaj.
Right.
No, I'm okay. No. Yeah, I'll strain my leg if I sit there.
Okay, I think
what happens is that when I'm sitting as a board member in many of the committees, right from the board, the audit committee, the risk committee, I think the common thread which is coming across through all these discussions is about a concern about the IT and the security. I think when we are also discussing enterprise risk management into our risk committee meetings, I think the major portion which comes out of the enterprise risk management is the cyber security or the IT part of the business, which is becoming more and more prominent, I would say more prominent even than the basic business risks. I think that is getting really in big proportions, and every business needs to devote that kind of an attention to this particular aspect, without which no business will be able to survive now. I cannot choose to remain aloof from what is happening in the technology or in the outside world. Can I really afford not to have an email ID or not to have a mobile? Or similarly, no business today can afford to be away from the digital world, and the way the millennials are moving. I think everybody wants to do business on the go, wherever they are, whichever location they are, whichever circumstances they are, and they want to go forward. If you are not enabling your enterprise for digital transformation, then your business is not likely to succeed. And it is imperative that for digital transformation, unless you take care of digital security, it is going to be very, very tough. So I think all the boardroom discussions are revolving mainly around IT security and the overall the digital transformation. So which is the buzzword now?
Yeah, so just a follow-on question, that as you sit in the board meeting and you are at the other end of the attack, and you know, it's maybe not a cyber attack, but it's a very real attack. And does the board ask you, I mean, please explain to me, what is the framework you're following for security?
Yeah.
Is there a norm? Is there a standard? You know, is there something, best practices? Do they ask this question? If they ask this question, what is the reply you give?
I wish, Hemant, they were as polite as you. Now the issue is that I think all companies, all boards, everybody understands that data is a very important asset, maybe more important than your servers or laptops or your premises or whatever, because this particular asset carries a huge liability also along with it. Okay, so if you lose your server, or if your server crashes, if your laptop is broken, maybe you can replace it very easily, but replacing data is going to be very, very tough. So I think everybody understands in the board about this, and with the new Companies Act, the new responsibilities cast on the independent directors, new women directors coming into the board.
They are difficult, huh?
Yes, yes. Very I think they come with a lot of experience, and I think women have a different angle to asking different questions. I think I was not expecting few of the questions which I have been witnessing since last two board meetings, since when the women directors have come in. I think women, they manage businesses as well as they manage home, because I think men lack in terms of handling that overall responsibilities, and that is where they look at any problem more holistically. I feel that way, and I think the questions are really targeted. So they are asking about since the data is an important asset, what is the framework? Who is first responsible in terms of, I think that is fixing the accountability. Yeah. Who is responsible? And whether the person who has been taken as a responsible person, whether he enjoys the necessary freedom or the authority and the accountability, whether he is at a sufficiently high level. It cannot be the information security officer or the information technology head. He alone cannot be held responsible for whatever is happening across the organization. Because unless people follow the discipline, people follow the password policy, people follow the different kind of security system, unless they log the incidents, it's not going to be possible for the IT department also to have any kind of track. So they are actually asking us questions, pointed questions, as to whether there have been any incidents, what kind of weaknesses those incidents have thrown up, what corrective actions we have taken, what is the strength of the IT security team or the IT security overall structure as such. If we are asking for any investments into the IT security, whether that investment is justified, whether do we need to invest more, do we need to invest little less, whether the investment or the returns are in line with costs and benefits. I think the earlier speaker was talking in terms of we have to live with risk. And ultimately, we have to balance the costs and the benefits in terms of managing this risk. So we are really getting pointed questions as far as this.
Thank you. So Ashish, let me, I mean, for a minute, forget that we come from the same organization. How do you see, how do you see this whole issue of framework, approaches, standards in this field?
Hemant, I think you touched upon the thing which is close to not just organizations, but governments across the world. Approaches have not been so drastically different because, I mean, I'll come a little more detail into what specifically they touch upon. But the more important thing is, when have they actually started coming onto the whole bandwagon? You have European Union, which has actually been there since the late 90s. They probably were already effecting certain specific rules, but when it comes to something handling data, let's say data privacy, they were pretty much with the law. Can you hear me? Sorry. Yeah, and I can hear myself. So I'm touching upon the fact that when it comes to specific laws, and let's touch upon, let's say, a data privacy law. Data privacy law for European Union, the first semblance of it was somewhere in 1998.
Wow.
And at that point in time, you already had pieces and guidelines in terms of how an organization needs to acquire data, manage the entire life cycle of it, what are the checks and balances that they need to have when they're basically processing that data for commercial use, publishing that data out, and so on and so forth. And even sort of managing the disposal of the data. Now, from that point onwards, as I said, the point is not so much about how different are the frameworks. The point is actually when all these sort of countries have come in, and when countries have come in, the organizations in those countries have actually adopted them in. So I touched upon European Union. Next possibly was the entire North American belt. And it's a very classic case, Hemant. In North America, US at this point of time, both US and Canada to that extent, have a system of federal laws and state-specific laws when it comes to data privacy, certain guidelines around information security.
They're different, is it?
They don't stop there. Then they have sectoral laws. So you will have a specific law for healthcare, for banking, for insurance, and so on and so forth. Internet banking and everywhere. So at this point of time, California would be one state where they have about 25 specific laws for managing data privacy, for information security, and so on and so forth. Besides that, if you look at some of the countries closer to our part of the world, APAC, that's been some story which is more sort of, I would not say catching up, but yeah, I mean, most of the laws that you see, full-blown laws are there in, let's say, Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea. These guys have actually taken up laws, and they've taken up frameworks specifically based on all the major guidelines. And where the guidelines are coming from, they're coming from NIST, they're coming from something like a safe harbor law, they're coming from FTC, they're coming from European Union, so on and so forth. But they are the one who've actually caught on with this in the sort of, I would say, the 2007 onwards, 8 onwards, and stuff like that. India and China are the ones where we do not have a very specific data privacy law. We have an IT Act, and we pretty much pick up most of the policy-related requirements or privacy-specific requirements from that Information IT Act law itself. Somewhat similar case for China as well. Bill for India is still awaited. We are still to have a bill turned into a law at some point in time. But this part of the world has been a little more guided by other laws which had their own privacy, data privacy IT-specific requirements, and that's what they've gone in. You touched upon how organizations are taking, so let me come a little more specific to it. So what are these guidelines? And if you really have to talk about which are the 5 most important pieces that you really have to think of through, and what these guidelines are pushing to you. One of my client, which I work with, said, hey, I'm an IT company in Pune. Please help me understand what would be, do you have a mechanism where you can actually help me to understand all my privacy requirements, all my IT compliance requirements, which I need to be aware of, which I need to practice, because I am going to be operating not just in the 10 countries that I'm currently in, but I'm probably going to be moving into another 15. And
130,
what are,
I have a client, 130 countries.
right, and yeah, we would know, not many marks for that. But yeah, essentially, so keeping that in mind, compliance in itself is becoming a major requirement. Having said that, what are some of those 4 or 5 key pieces? Number 1, I think I touched upon it, managing the entire data lifecycle, starting from when data comes into your organization, you're a vendor, you are processing data for someone, or you may be a telecom operator and you're acquiring data of your customer. How do you process that data? What is the checks and balances in terms of really making sure that all through this process, you are managing the data in a manner that there is least possibility of data being pilfered and moved out of the organization or in an unsecured way. Pieces around vendor assurance. What vendor assurance means is essentially looking at when you do transfer this data for logical reason, for authorized business reason, how do you ensure that your vendor, who's going to be a part service provider to the end customer, how are they making sure that the data is secured? Third point, as a customer, if you are providing me services, I need to have proper control on the access that the data that you're going to take from me, and at any point in time, I should be able to see through how that data is actually moving through the organization, how is that data being used. Goes without saying, you would also want to make sure that before passing on that data, and that is something that all of us pretty much, whenever we get into any kind of a new link, register ourselves for new services, there is definitely a question that we will possibly be using it for X, Y, Z purpose. And we tick that. That is actually coming based on a specific requirement that the organization need to make sure that they do take a consent before passing on the data. If any of these things are not taken care, it comes with a definite and a specific penalty for the organizations. I would say at this point of time, while these are good principles, these are guidelines, these are things that you need to follow, probably our enforcement piece needs to be better off. But definitely, when we are not just operating in India, but we are actually talking about taking care of customer requirements across the world, all of these breaches, all of these data leakages definitely come with their own punitive damages that one organization needs to look at. So my sort of summing it up and totaling it up, there are multiple places, multiple sort of guidelines. The theme of it around is going to be really looking at about 5 or 6 key guidelines in terms of managing the data, data lifecycle, really looking through ensuring that when you pass on the data, there is certain set of checks and balances required.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Ashish. Vittal, the nation wants to know, the nation wants to know what is ISACA doing in this area? What is the standards it is looking at? What are the different standards? In the morning, from morning we heard NIST. Then the gentleman from Ahmedabad Forensic Laboratory, he said something, I don't remember. Does anybody remember? He said this. So I think 6, 7 frameworks, were talked about. And then I'm sure there is something in ISO and BS and anyway, it's bullshit. So, things like that. So the nation wants to know what we are doing in this area.
I'm glad, Hemant, I'm on prime time.
Yes.
It's a very interesting question, to be very frank. When you said, A, what is ISACA doing about India? Let me answer that specific question, that's one. What's ISACA doing generally globally about this? In fact, over a long period of time, first I'll talk about the global part and then come to the India part. Over a long period of time, ISACA has had this specific capability which was set aside saying that government and regulatory bodies task force. And this was there in about 4 regions across the world. One of them was Asia, and which included the India part. In fact, India was the only country to have a task force of its own under the GRA as part of that. And one of the key the terms of reference for this task force was to identify what's happening in these countries from the governmental side, from the regulatory side, and let's understand whatever we are doing in the professional space in terms of professional standards that we are talking about, can we make some meaning of these to a compliance requirement that's coming up in these regions. So, in fact, if you really look at COVID 4.1, and I'm sure anybody who's not familiar with COVID here, so that I can expand that for you. Okay, so COVID is one of the standards from ISACA, if you can say, not even the standard, it's more of a framework, as they say, and it's also believed to be, well, the standard of standards or the framework or the umbrella framework, and there are so many things attached to that. The fundamental idea was to first understand region-wise. In fact, if you go to ISACA's website, and if you go to a particular place wherein it has a list of all the regulatory case studies that are happening, and very interesting case studies which are picked out of like Dubai municipality, how they adopted COVID-5 and they have found so many things. So there are plenty of them there. But one thing stands out when you say in all this with regard to what's been happening lately is, I think COVID has been there for a long time. But then COVID was like a toothless tiger, And COVID-5, when it transformed, I don't know if we have COVID practitioners here. Anybody who has implemented COVID or being part of the COVID exercise? Okay, there are. Okay, of course, I said there. So, COVID-5 has transformed from a checklist into a Bible. So, somewhere, many people have found they got getting lost. That's one perspective. That's the not so good perspective. But the good perspective is there are more organizations now adopting pieces and the framework of COVID-5 and finding that it actually pays, primarily from the compliance perspective. Why? Because, I can just share this with one of my...
I think maybe you should take 2 minutes because many people may not be aware of COVID.
Okay.
Take 2 minutes to just...
Sure. So, in a nutshell, what does, COVID expands, if you really do, it says control objectives for information and related technology. In fact, it's very important to underline the word related because it's not a technical standard. It is not about a technology standard. It is a standard which puts business information first and says, okay, now technology is a given thing. So what do I now do to see this technology delivers the kind of information that I need in terms of the right information being at the right place with the right person. So in a nutshell, that's what COVID does, right? So, but of course now we just use the acronym COVID because COVID has gone beyond the control objectives and it has gone into the business objectives. So that's the reason, if, for example, it is sacrilege to expand ISACA now. So earlier, if you see, it was Information Systems Audit and Control Association. We don't expand that now because we are going beyond. Starting off as an Audit and Control Association, we've gone much, much beyond from there, and we are now into the IT governance space.